Hello everyone and welcome to another Little Nightmares video. Today's topic of discussion is simply going to be Mono's motivations. The reason I question his motivations is because it doesn't really make sense why he's doing what he's doing. In Little Nightmares 1, Six's motivations were very clear and intuitive. She was trying to escape the Maw. We found her at the bottom of this evil cannibalistic death ship. Of course she'd want to escape, it makes sense. The girl in the yellow raincoat in Very Little Nightmares was trying to escape the nest. The runaway kid was trying to escape the Maw as well. It seems to me like a lot of the motivations up to this point for our children have been very simple. They just want to escape. And it seemed to me like Mono was doing the opposite. He was consistently putting himself and Six into more danger by going deeper and deeper into the city. But I think I've figured it out. Using the sounds of nightmares, I think I've figured out that he was trying to escape. Just not in a way we understood at the time. I believe, using the knowledge that we gained from the Sounds of Nightmares, we learned that the tower was essentially tricking Mono into thinking that it was the escape, that it was a means of getting out of the nowhere. Unfortunately, that came with consequences to not only himself and his own livelihood, but his relationship with Six. While I used to think Little Nightmares 2's story was a little unclear and convoluted, not in the mysterious cool way, but in the way that there didn't seem to be a story being told, using what we know now, using the outside media, I think I've pieced together the story and I'm able to dissect the two main characters, how they're feeling, and why they're doing what they're doing. One of the main questions in the fandom for a while was, why did Six drop Mono? I think I've concretely solved it today. Welcome to the Overman channel, and thank you for watching. Before we get to the rest of the video, however, I would like to inform you all new viewers of my Patreon and Discord server. All of my links will be in the description. I also recommend following my other socials, as I post a lot of other art there that hasn't been featured on the channel yet. Thank you all for your support, it means the world to me. As I was saying, one of my critiques with Little Nightmares 2 was that it seemed like Mono had no reason for doing anything that he did. Like, he was in the forest, which seemed relatively safe. The traps were easily avoidable, him and Six ended up killing the hunter. It seemed like there's not a lot of dangerous wildlife that poses any immediate threat, and the hunter seemed pretty stocked up on food. Mono and Six had no reason to leave and go towards the city, yet they did. Then, Mono came across the TVs, something he seemed to be attuned to in a way. It seemed clear that, it'd be a terrible idea to open the door, yet Mono was so insistent on putting Six in more danger than he needed to by bringing her deeper into the city just to chase those TVs. He wasn't escaping anything by going towards the tower and further into the city. He was going from one danger to another. He had some other motivation, and in-game, it was very unclear why he'd be doing this. No wonder Six dropped him at the end of the game. The entire time, he brought her further into the city and exposed her to more danger. She's trying to escape the danger. She tries to escape the nest, then she goes on to try and escape the Maw. But Mono goes further into the city, exposing them to more danger for some inexplicable reason. That was my original critique, and I still feel like it holds up, because we don't get this information in-game. We have to listen to the Sounds of Nightmares to get the extra context. For the main character's main motivation to be unclear, when it's hard to interpret what's going on, it's hard for me to get engaged with the game when I don't really know why we should be going towards the school, why we should be trying to escape the hospital. We could have escaped the hospital by just not going in. You know what I mean? Not knowing the main character's motivations kind of breaks my immersion a little bit. But having solved it, now that we have the hindsight, now that we have the information, it helps me when I replay the game. But I still feel like that's a pretty valid critique, the fact that this information is not in-game. That not in-game information being the Threshold, which is a place that's introduced in the Sounds of Nightmares. In the Sounds of Nightmares, we are introduced to this in-between place between the waking world and the nowhere. Noon describes this place as this dark, foggy, directionless area where she felt as if she were floating through it. At the end of her time in the Threshold, Noon recounts a door, the color of twilight, with an eye in the center of it. Upon opening the door, she sees stairs stretching in every direction at once, with the ferryman there to meet her and take her into the nowhere. This description of the Threshold seems very similar to the hallway Mono continually found himself in when going into the TV. The long stretching hallway, the color of twilight, loose gravity with debris floating about, and Mono jumping in what seems like low gravity. The most damning piece of evidence is the door with the eye at the end of it. There are a lot of similarities, but also a few differences. The threshold store floated in a vast nothingness, while the hallway is this real constructed place just with wonky physics. And the inside of the tower resembles the lobby area the ferryman meets Noon in. I think the tower is trying to resemble the threshold in order to trick kids into entering it. I want to clarify, before I continue, that I don't really believe in the time loop theory. I feel like there have been many different children in the past with TV-style powers like Mono who fell for the trap and became other Thin Men. Mono was hunted by some other separate warped child, not some grown version of himself. That being said, if my air theory is true, that could be a good reason for the tower to be molded after the threshold. It's like a fly trap, constantly tricking the flies and eating them one at a time, one after another. Mono being just the most recent fly that got eaten. But I think him being tricked was his motivation for going deeper into the city. He was simply trying to escape the nowhere. He fell for it. He thought the TVs would lead him to the threshold, would lead him back home. But he was wrong, and he fell for the trap. I think if those were his intentions all along, to escape, we can already see the Nowhere's effects on his character. He has this sort of every man for himself mentality. He continually put Six in danger, and in the end, his only goal was to escape. Maybe he thought Six could follow him through the TVs, or maybe he was planning on betraying her. Either way, his negligence consistently put Six in more danger than she should have ever been in. I think this characterizes Mono, and it shows the Nowhere's effects on him. Maybe he was planning on betraying her, maybe he was ignorant, or maybe he just didn't realize. He could very well just not realize that Six is struggling, or not realize that she's being put in more danger because of him. He does consistently try to save her. I don't think he's being outright malicious, but at the end of the day, he's a kid. At the end of the day, he's a kid who doesn't really know much. He doesn't have a lot of life experience considering his life was robbed from him, and now he's stuck in this evil, twisted nightmare dimension. I also think this characterizes the other Thin Men and Six and everything. I think all of the previous Thin Men were tricked, just like Mono was. They all wanted to escape the Nowhere, but succumbed to it instead. I thought for a while that when the tower shaped the children into the Thin Men, it filled their heads with thoughts and ideas that benefited the tower. For more information, go watch my designated theory on that. The tower wants the Thin Men to capture children like Mono to continue this cycle of abuse. But I think now, at their core, the Thin Man and past Thin Men were and still are just children in their hearts. They weren't given the chance to grow up, and are still impressionable children deep down. That's why the Thin Man in Little Nightmares 2 tries to capture Mono. After mentally and physically being shaped by the tower, he was essentially indoctrinated into being the tower's peon. Little tangent, but I also feel like the lady in Little Nightmares 1 was a similar case of a child growing up in the Nowhere without any actual growth or guidance. She has all those dolls because she wants to care for children in a way that she wasn't cared for. Child and resident alike register in her brain as threats she has to eliminate in order for her to keep surviving. Either way, I think Mono and the previous Thin Men fell for the tower's trap. Mono wanted to escape the Nowhere. He pursued the tower after putting Six in danger the whole time, but once he saw her get captured and turned into a monster, his new focus was on saving her instead of escaping. It took him physically seeing the effects of his actions in order for him to realize his mistakes and try to learn and change. In the end, he does save Six. But Six has learned a different lesson. Six has learned that she can't rely on him. She feels like she wouldn't have gotten in that mess if it weren't for Mono in the first place. And even though he saved her, she gave him no chance for him to make it up to her. These children aren't evil, but they are still children. They don't understand what's happening in the Nowhere. They're scared and confused and want to survive. Mono focused on surviving more than his friend, and now Six does the same. Both of their actions show the Nowhere's effect on their psyche. Six didn't give Mono the chance to fix his mistakes because she can't risk being hurt again. She can't risk being put in the constant danger. The Nowhere is so dangerous, and taking those risks isn't worth it. I think that's what makes Little Nightmares 2 ending and overall story so tragic. It wasn't this ultimate betrayal of Six being evil and killing Mono. It was the story of a scared child who kept trying to escape this evil nightmare realm. But in his efforts, he endangered the one companion he had in this world. And by the time he realized how badly he fucked up, it was too late. He wasn't able to fix his mistakes. He wasn't able to mend his and Six's friendship. Six dropped him because she felt she had to protect herself. The sad, gut-wrenching theme of Little Nightmares 2 is the idea of hurting someone and then never being able to fix your mistakes. And as we know, no one in the nowhere gets a happy ending. Even though I feel like I've solved the lore of Little Nightmares 2, I've put together the story that they were trying to tell, I still feel as if my critiques were a little bit valid. Comparing Little Nightmares 2 and the way it tells its story to every other installment in the franchise, Little Nightmares 2's chapters are completely separate and disconnected from one another. The wilderness is completely isolated from the city and has absolutely no connection to the school or the hospital. The school has no connection to the hospital, and there's just no connection. There's no connecting theme, you know what I mean? There's no unifying idea. When compared to Little Nightmares 1, the prison held children. The children were then transferred to the lair where the janitor took care of them. He then sent them off to the kitchen to be cooked, and then these new kid-turned meals were then fed to the guests. The guests were then kind of fed to other guests or the lady with their life force or whatever, and then it kind of cycles. It's this ecosystem. Each chapter, each room connects to the next thing. Same thing with Very Little Nightmares. There aren't chapters per se, but there are different individual levels that just kind of lead to the next. We don't see that in Little Nightmares 2. We don't see this overarching theme, this overarching narrative. One could say it's the idea of TVs, but we don't really see TVs being utilized elsewhere. Like, we see broken TVs in the wilderness and kind of a little bit in the hospital, but the school doesn't really care for TVs. The hospital doesn't really care for TVs. You know what I mean? That isn't a unifying theme. There's this one thing that a lot of people say, because that's what, the developers have said about the game, that there's this unifying theme of escapism. However, I just don't see it. I get the hunter trying to escape the city, right? The teacher doesn't really fit the escapism theme, though. Like, yeah, she plays music the one time, but I wouldn't really consider that as this major part of the theme of escapism. And the bullies don't fit. The doctor doesn't really fit either. One could say he's escaping the world around him by indulging in his work, but it feels more like an if the shoe fits argument rather than this was intentional design. It feels like, oh, well, maybe this little thing could fit that idea. Maybe this thing could fit, but it also doesn't have to. Like, it could be interpreted in a different way. And I feel like that, I don't know, there isn't that unifying idea, that unifying thread that Little Nightmares 1, Very Little Nightmares, The Sounds of Nightmares, everything else has had. That's the one thing that Little Nightmares 2 doesn't have. It has a lot of missed potential. And when you hear me say this, I want to clarify, I am not trying to bash Tarsier. They did a great job with what they had. There's a lot of concept art, a lot of ideas that didn't get put into fruition. Dave Murray said in an interview one time that 6 originally wasn't going to be in Little Nightmares 2. The devs originally had a very different idea for the game and how it would turn out and how it would be made, all of those things. But I think that just pressure to meet deadlines and budget constraints and things like that, they weren't able to put out the product that they want. A lot of why I talk about my criticisms for Little Nightmares 2, I haven't talked about them at length yet, but the reason why I bring it up now is just, it's something to keep in mind when new Little Nightmares projects comes out. It's something to think about. It's something to try and recognize. When you're playing Little Nightmares 3, try to see what Low and Alone are doing, why they're doing that, if it fits. You know what I mean? When you're writing your own Little Nightmare stories, the main reason I like to think about this, the main reason I like to find these flaws in the story and things that could be improved, things that could be fixed, is because I like to write my own Little Nightmare stories. I like to make my own Little Nightmares creatures. And I plan on making a video on a story that I'm writing soon. But the main reason why I like to analyze this is to see where Little Nightmares 2 failed so I can hopefully improve upon that in my own story. Little Nightmares 1 is a big inspiration for my work, so I try and not mimic, not replicate, but I try to get that feeling. I try to get that aura that Little Nightmares 1 had. And with Little Nightmares 2, I see its failings and I try to improve upon that. And I try to see that missed potential and I try to twist it into something that I could use in my own works. And I think that's what Supermassive Games is doing as well. I can make a whole video about this. I'm not going to go in depth here. But I feel like the bullies are by far the worst part of Little Nightmares 2 because they actively take away from a story that could be told. You know? The brief explanation is Little Nightmares 1 was heavily focused around the visitors, around these children that were prisoners and just kind of in these terrible environments, in these terrible conditions. Little Nightmares 2 had the perfect setup with the school, with these visitors being kind of held there, with these children being held there, being tortured, indoctrinated, whatever you want to call it, right? Whatever they could have done. They chose to not do that and have these fake kids that are just evil, and that's it. They kind of don't really have a purpose. Like I said, I'll go in depth on another video. But I think that Supermassive saw the bullies' failings and reworked it into the puppets that we see in Little Nightmares 3. Supermassive and Bandai see the failings of Little Nightmares 2, they see the missed potential, and they're trying to work it into something worthwhile. They're trying to change the bullies from what they are into something cooler, something more in theme with Little Nightmares, something more worth showing off, if that makes sense. And I think that's something to get excited about. To recognize the flaws of Little Nightmares 2 and then seeing that Little Nightmares 3 is going to meet those expectations and then some, it's something to get excited about. I'm very excited to see the future of this franchise. Anyways, that's all I have to say for today. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it. Leave your comments if you have any thoughts on my critiques of Little Nightmares 2 or just any ideas on the theory I put together of what the story is trying to tell is. Subscribe if you want to. Check out the description, join the Discord, check out my Patreon, my other socials. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your guys' support. I reached 10,000 subscribers, and I cannot be more grateful about it. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you soon. I hope to see you in another video soon. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.